What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so after going through the comment section for my video on The Incredible Hulk Explained, one of the things that a lot of people have pointed out is that I had skipped over the idea or the characters of Guild Hulk and Devil Hulk. And the reason for that was because of the fact that I'd never really considered them to be really significant. I mean, for the most part, Guild Hulk appeared in this story for the very first time, and then he popped up in like 2 more stories, and that was it. Devil Hulk had an appearance in like 2 or 3 stories, and that was about it. These are characters that together probably appeared in about 7 or 8 different comics throughout the entire Incredible Hulk run. But I figured, you know, what the hey, we could probably do like an origin on Guild Hulk and just kind of go from there and jump into this story a little bit. Now, with regards to this particular issue, The Incredible Hulk number 377, this is basically self-contained. It's completely isolated. And one of the reasons why this is so important, especially being a story that came out in 1991, is that this was part of the writings of Peter David. Now, for those of you guys who are just joining us with regards to The Incredible Hulk, we had talked about in our Incredible Hulk Explained video that writer Bill Mantlo had introduced the notion that the Incredible Hulk was basically just all the suppressed rage that Bruce Banner had experienced due to his abusive father. Writer Peter David took this a step further and then began focusing and reinventing these different personalities of the Incredible Hulk, bringing in things like Joe Fixit in order to basically bolster the Incredible Hulk mythos and to make Bruce Banner appear to be a lot more psychologically damaged than we originally thought. Now again, this was really just rooted in the idea of trying to expand his character, and that's usually par for the course when it comes to superheroes, when it comes to teams. Chris Claremont did it with the X-Men, Roy Thomas did it with the Avengers. All these different writers just kind of expand on existing characters in the realm of Marvel Comics in the hopes that they can basically carve out their own little niche and transform the character into something relatable or something interesting or tangible or whatever the case may be. Now, one thing that I do want to have a discussion about here for a second is the concept of Joe Fixit. Joe Fixit is a character that was basically sort of rolled over as the Grey Hulk following the first appearance of the Grey Hulk proper. The reason why I say this is because of the fact that when the Incredible Hulk was first created, he was basically gray. And it was simply because of the fact that, again, Stan Lee didn't want to basically hop on the idea that the Incredible Hulk represented any particular race. But the issue with that was that they just simply couldn't keep him gray because printing presses just didn't work that effectively at the time in order to maintain the color scheme. And so the result was that the Incredible Hulk was turned into a green character. Now, for years and years and years, the Incredible Hulk stayed green. That was just the nature of him. But when Peter David and various other writers began to take over the story and the Incredible Hulk landscape began to bolster, with issue number 324, Joe Fixit was introduced, and what essentially happened here is Marvel came back and they said, well, when the Incredible Hulk first popped up, it was Joe Fixit. It was the gray Joe Fixit Hulk, but somewhere along the line, there was a switch. And so when the Incredible Hulk went from gray to green, it simply meant that the Joe Fixit personality receded, it went away, and he was replaced with the Savage Hulk. And it was the explanation that Marvel offered in order to basically reconcile these two differing colors of the Hulk and give fans an understanding of the different personalities that the Incredible Hulk has. Now, with regards to this bit of a story here, we initially pick up with Doc Samson. And Doc Samson is basically just one of these supporting characters of the Hulk family, pretty significant in terms of the different roles that he's played over the course of his publication history, but within the confines of Marvel, at least in terms of this story and really a lot of other future stories, his strength isn't limitless, but he was basically exposed to gamma radiation like the Incredible Hulk. The difference is that his hair actually grows longer the stronger he gets, which is kind of an interesting little caveat to this. But all this really just seems to take place in the mind of Bruce Banner. And the reason why is because of the fact that, again, Peter David focused very heavily on the split personalities of Bruce Banner, which is to say that the differing versions of the Hulk all represented different aspects of his own mind. Savage Hulk was unrelenting rage. Joe Fixit was the desire for absolute control. And so what this does is it introduces Guilt Hulk as basically all this suppressed guilt that Bruce Banner had experienced at the hands of his abusive father. And the way this begins to manifest is when Savage Hulk and when Grey Hulk are basically brought together in order to reconcile their varying differences, in the sense that because of the fact that Bruce Banner and Savage Hulk and Grey Hulk are all vying for dominance of Banner's body, it's basically tearing his mind apart in the sense that they're all basically clamoring over their time in the sun. But in the middle of all this, they're suddenly met with this giant monstrous manifestation that nobody knew was there. And that's one of the things that's kind of cool here, is because what this does is it hints at the idea that the emergence of Joe Fixit Fixit or the emergence of Savage Hulk or the emergence of Bruce Banner wasn't necessarily done by rage or control or a desire for some measure of calm. Instead, they were escaping the Guild Hulk from the mind of Bruce Banner. And so again, it's kind of a cool concept here, because what Guild Hulk does is it basically pops up at these varying instances when Doc Samson begins to go through these different paths of Bruce Banner when he was a child, when he was opening Christmas presents and his father lashed out over Bruce Banner's love of science and different things like that, feeling inadequate. Grey Hulk is easily overtaken by Guild Hulk alongside Savage Hulk himself. Now, the other half of this involves a character by the name of Ringmaster. Now, Ringmaster is not really important at all. I mean, he was very much a minor character. He was really unimportant. But the cool thing about this is that he is a character, or at least Maynard Tybalt, as he exists in this story, is a character that's really just kind of working alongside Doc Samson. And so the reason for this is that as a villain, he had tried to reform himself on a handful of occasions. And in one of the most notable instances, or at least around the time this story was written, he'd actually come into conflict with Power Pack, which was a superhero team led by Franklin Richards when he was still a little kid. But in attempting to reform himself, getting into a conflict with the Power Pack led to him being arrested, which in turn allowed him to be released under the guidance and under the watch of Doc Samson, who in turn tried to continue this path of Ringmaster becoming a good guy. So again, not the most important thing, but it does offer a little bit of context as to why a villain is working alongside Doc Samson in trying to help deal with the Incredible Hulk. But again, the whole idea of Guild Hulk popping up time and time again comes in the form of attempts of like Bruce Banner's mother to escape with Bruce himself back when he was younger in order to basically get away from their abusive father. And that's what ultimately ends up happening here. With regards to this Guild Hulk persona, this is basically just the perception of Bruce Banner in terms of how he viewed his father. And that's the reason why whenever this conflict takes place, whenever Guild Hulk basically pops up, Bruce Banner addresses it as his father. He addresses it as his dad. And so what ends up happening here is this basically allows for coming together of sorts between Bruce Banner and the Grey Hulk and Savage Hulk in order to fend off against Guild Hulk. Now again, this is all taking place in the mindscape. This is not taking place in the real world. And that's the reason why Guild Hulk is so powerful, because when it comes to the mind of Bruce Banner, whoever it is that Bruce Banner perceives to be the most powerful is who actually is the most powerful. And that's ultimately what it was that Peter David was drawing on here. He was basically saying, despite the vast strength that Bruce Banner has when he's the Incredible Hulk, despite how capable and moderately intelligent Joe Fixit is in comparison to the Savage Hulk, ultimately, neither of these people dominate the minds of Bruce Banner. Instead, it's very much Guild Hulk. It's very much Bruce Banner's fear and guilt and hatred of his father. But the other half of this is that it also draws on the notion that despite the fact that Bruce Banner was a victim as a kid, at the end of the day, he still views himself as having been at fault. If he wasn't as smart as he was, his father wouldn't have beat him. If he didn't leave with his mother, his father wouldn't have killed his mother. You know, if these things hadn't taken place, it would have resulted in him having some measure of a normal life. And so it's very much designed to draw on this idea that Bruce Banner suffers from a victim's mentality, which is to say he blames himself for his situation as opposed to blaming the individual who's actually at fault. And so again, what this does is it allows Bruce Banner to essentially face his fears. And that was really kind of the basis behind this story. It was essentially sort of this tail end, this kind of crescendo, so to speak, with regards to Peter David's run and all the different stories and all the different events that had taken place that were designed to focus on the personalities of Bruce Banner, these different iterations of how he viewed himself, and these different representations of his own viewpoint and mental state at any one particular time. And so ultimately, Grey Hulk and really just kind of Bruce Banner himself overpower Guild Hulk, which basically begins to transform itself and modify back into his father. And so ultimately what ends up taking place is that this appearance of his dad begins to go away and then transforms into his mother. And that's the core of the entire Guild Hulk's existence, is that Bruce Banner looks at the life around him. He looks at where he is. He looks at everything that's happened over the course of his existence. He looks at the death of his mother and basically blames himself. He's filled with guilt over the fact that his mother was killed by his father, owing to the idea that Bruce Banner himself had somehow screwed up or done something wrong. Again, very much this twisted sort of ideology when it comes to how he views himself. And so the result is that Bruce Banner is able to take this little bit of his own aspect, put it aside, and basically move forward by making himself a more dynamic and capable character. And this comes into play with the emergence of Professor Hulk. And the reason why this happens is because Bruce Banner is able to basically reconcile with Savage Hulk as well as Joe Fixit, and in turn, all three basically merge into a singular being. It ultimately results in Bruce Banner having the strength of the Incredible Hulk while also maintaining his own mental faculties. And it makes him one of the most capable versions of the Incredible Hulk. In truth, shy of being Maestro, I would say this is probably one of the most powerful versions, maybe second only to like Worldbreaker Hulk or something along those lines. But again, this is really just kind of designed to set the stage. Now, from this point going forward, it was really just sort of this idea of Professor Hulk and how it existed and how he functioned and so on and so forth. In truth, Guild Hulk actually wouldn't really reappear until the 2000s when Paul Jenkins had taken over the story. But again, that brings in characters like Angela Lipscomb and different things like that, which we'll do a separate video on that with regards to the return of Guild Hulk and the different personas having to battle against him, just because of the fact that it sees this wholesale expansion of everything that was going on in terms of the Incredible Hulk's mind and all these different personalities that Bruce Banner has, in the sense that he's got multiple variations of the Incredible Hulk inside of his own mind, some of which we've never seen, some of which we have seen, and some of which we'll never see again outside of that story. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.